night. This is update for May 7, 2022, day 73 of the war, end of the date update. As always, we're going to do two parts. One is strategic and discussing various aspects that affect the war itself, and then we're going to do walkthrough through the front line. For those who are super impatient and just want to know what's going on the front line, in short, there is not much going on right now. Very little changes. We're just going to address potential Ukrainian offensive towards Izyum bridgehead, but beyond that, there's nothing really of importance today. So let's go back to strategic questions, and let's start with several of those because they surface in the comment section again and again. So first one, actually, let's discuss few other items very short regarding agricultural situation in Ukraine. So, for example, today Ukrainian government prohibited export of buckwheat and oats. Obviously, buckwheat is not essential for the West, but it's being used elsewhere in the world as one of the grains. And then oats, we also don't know if this is really important, probably minor importance, but it just gives us idea of the trend where things are going. And we're probably going to see more and more of that sometime at the end of July or early August, when the grain will be harvested, and we'll find out that there is not that much. And Ukrainian government will try to protect, or allegedly protect, population from rising prices and so on. So that's, in our opinion, probably is coming. We're not sure if it's gonna affect wheat, which is one of the major export commodities from Ukraine, but it probably will affect more or less everything agriculture-wise. So that's one question. Then there was a question about where's Ukrainian reinforcements and so on. So, and we want to make it very explicitly for everyone. There is a problem and huge shortage of military equipment and ammunition in Ukraine. So that's really what stops Ukrainian side from taking advantage of temporary excess of manpower that Ukraine has right now over Russian invading forces. Let's make it very precise, before Russian mobilization. So for now, there is, just as an example, they start issuing Maxim machine guns, and that machine gun was developed at the end of the 19th century, used in World War One. It's a good tool, but it tells you desperation, right? Or old Soviet DP-27 machine gun, which was developed in 1927 and accepted by the Soviet Army in 1927, and was the main machine gun for Soviet infantry in World War II. So just understand the difficulty of the whole situation in terms of weapons, right? Equipment and all that. So that's what prevents Ukraine from, quickly raising more brigades and throwing more troops at the Russian invading forces. So hopefully that puts it to the rest. Then another question is this question about BTGs, which stands for Battalion Tactical Groups. It's coming up all the time. This construct of BTG is really a construct of the Western military analyst basically Western construct that doesn't really work, and it's not how this war is being kind of how it plays out. This part of the world, people don't think in BTGs. Even they can try to talk to the West in BTGs because they understand that the West only understands BTGs. But BTGs is a product of not having real wars for the past 80 years since World War II. Well, you can call since Korean War maybe. And because there was no intense war, so there were no large there was no need for large scale units. Like before, the main unit was division, right? Which, let's say, roughly 10,000 people. But this is just for the sake of example, right? Then, because there were no wars, both Ukrainian and Russian armies switched to brigade levels, which roughly half of the division, actually it's more like a 40% of division, right? And even could be even up to 30% of division. So it's between 3 to 4,000 people on average. Obviously, there are there are a lot of variety and differences, but we're just generalizing right now, right? Because there was no war, so everybody's like, okay, we don't need army, we don't need all of that. And then even more step down from that, it is BTG, right? But this is really perception of the West that haven't had the real war for past since World War II, essentially. This war is in a way probably like sort of poor copy of World War II in terms of intensity, in terms of the number of troops and so on. So that's why you see here brigades fighting, or even divisions on the Russian side, right? So that's why they were forming divisions starting from about 2012, 2014, that time frame, and then they accelerated doing that in 16 and 18 time frame, and some divisions were even forming in February 2022. So this war is very different, and this needs to people like viewers needs to understand that there's nothing, it's not about BTGs, it's about brigades, and then in most cases brigades then fall down into battalions and then the companies. And then obviously there are a lot of like ad hoc sort of creations, because depending on the task, depending on the available resources, and in many cases you don't have enough resources, so you throw at the problem whatever you can master. And that's the nature of war. It's not orderly process. It's very chaotic, very messy process, where sometimes the commanders don't even understand where their troops are. Troops don't understand what's going on beyond their just direct line of sight, and so on. So it's a mess, right? It's game of many unknowns, essentially. So that's why we look at their units the way they are, not in BTGs or whatever. That's why we started actually creating this organizational tables to better explain what is there, how they, like what number of troops and so on. We just started this process, right? People poked many holes in our uncommitted Russian brigades number, and we will review that, and hopefully we will work with those who contributed and decided to cooperate or want to cooperate. Let's put it this way. We definitely look, open for help, and we will try to create as precise system as possible. And we're going to look then at Ukrainian side, but Ukrainian side is much more simpler, because everything is kind of on the table. Everything you see here, it's on this map, right? Because Russia has much more resources, and so they can pull more cards out of their pocket relative to Ukraine. Then there is another more political question in terms of Russia seems like there is, inside of the Russia, there is no understanding what to do right now. In terms of they got into this conflict, they thought it's going to be easy and nobody will say anything, and they'll just put Ukraine into their pocket and everything's going to be as always, as usual, business as usual. It didn't happen that way, and nobody planned apparently in Russia for this, call it plan B of total disaster. And now there is literally discussion we're seeing in our sort of open in front of us of what to do. So today there was some high-level Russian officials saying, okay, we're going to capture all of the Ukraine and we're going to get to the Polish border. So that's their answer. Yesterday or 2 days before, there was another one who was saying, okay, we're just going to annex Kherson region, which is what Russia captured here, right? And part of Zaporizhya, and then we're going to retake Donetsk region and Lugansk region. At this point, Russia essentially took almost entire of the Luhansk region, with exception of Severodonetsk. So there is variety of opinions, and there is opinion we need to do mobilization, and we need like 600,000 to 800,000 conscripts, right? And then the other one is like, no, we're not gonna do it. So there is very clear that inside of Russia there is no clarity on what to do with this conflict. Actually, this kind of like works in a way in terms of like it's inertia what's going on right now at this point. There is sort of clear tactical goal in front of the Russian troops is to try to encircle Ukrainian troops here in this Donbass peninsula, Donbass salient, which is kind of, you can say it's peninsular, except it's not a sea, but the idea is the same, right? Or force them to withdraw under the threat of being encircled, right? So they would leave, and then effectively Russia will fully control the Donetsk region. This is their immediate goal right now. So this is what's going on inside of Russia, and that obviously affects the whole fighting situation, because at this moment there is no commitment of more troops. So, and since Russian troops already suffered significant losses, which again nobody knows for sure because everybody's hiding, and the same goes true for Ukraine, right? But they are significant for sure, and so they don't have enough troops to continue active fighting everywhere as they used to. So first step was they withdrew from northern and northeastern Ukraine. If everyone remembers, it was end of March, around March 27, 28, somewhere in that ballpark. So they withdrew. And we mentioned that, but at that time, most people didn't believe us and still saw that somehow Russia control still stays somewhere here. So they withdrew. At this point, it got to the level that they cannot even fight on this shortened front line either, right? So they got the shortened front line, and then still they cannot actively fight and protect their position. So the first thing, sort of the first shoe to fall, was this Kharkiv front line. Essentially what Russian side did, they withdrew back to Russia, leaving just like 6 to 8 kilometer buffer zone. And even that buffer zone, we believe, is going to be sort of abandoned in probably a week time or so, right? So they don't even have enough to hold this shortened front line. So the first shoe was Kharkiv. They continue being active here in this Donbass salient, but that's essentially it. The rest is again here, Kherson bridgehead, also the same strategic defensive position. No attacks, kind of quiet and silent here, meaning silent in terms of there's artillery shelling, all that stuff, but there's no, offensive attempts or anything like that, right? Even this one is also this western section of the Zaporizhya front line is also just artillery shelling, that type of stuff. So really, the whole fighting really shortened to really small section, if you can consider it, relative to initial one, and then reduced one since end of March, and it even then still reduced to this one. And at this point, it gets to the level that we're seeing that Russian side is not able to do have any progress here on the Izyum bridgehead. So it's being quite quiet for probably 3-4 days, maybe even more. We don't remember exactly, but it's being quiet meaning there's no progress. There's intense fighting like every single day there. There's tons of people die there every single day from both sides. But there's no progress here. Essentially, it's a World War I type of situation. There is small progress around this Severodonetsk here, but it's really minor there. And there was little progress here in the south in this southern pincer area, but it was basically plugged by Ukrainian troops, and so there are reserves here. This Azov regiment, Kiev part of Azov regiment. It came here, and then 128th Brigade came here. So they essentially blocked Russian advancing troops, making the balance of power more or less even. And so at this point, it's going to be bloody World War One here, essentially, at this point, right? So even at this one, it's kind of in a way like a concrete, right? It's getting like, more rock solid and more rock solid everywhere. It started here the most, and it fell apart. Then it's here in Kherson, and now it's getting more and more rock solid here as well. And this is because there is not enough Russian troops to continue fighting. Ukraine is able, for now, they have enough manpower to send, and we're seeing a lot of reports of almost unprepared conscripts being sent, and Ukrainian militia mostly, actually, not so much even conscripts as Ukrainian militia being sent to the front line with not having enough training and all that stuff experience, to the point we've seen reports here, if you remember, there was fighting initially here, and the defense line was manned by 110th militia brigade and I think 111th here, and they were literally issued javelins and laws without even any instruction. Here, just like right before the fight, here it is, you go figure it out. And obviously that's not the way to go, but this is what's happening in this war, right? And the same we're seeing on the Russian side when they send this, people caught on the streets in Donetsk to the front line here in near Kharkiv, and even we're seeing them now as well in the southern pincer, where they totally unprepared. They have Soviet helmets from World War II on their heads as a protective equipment, and they being used basically to expose Ukrainian defensive positions, right? So they go in attack, Ukrainian side responds, many of them die, but then they expose Ukrainian, artillery pieces or machine guns or whatever, or tanks or whatever you want. And then the regular Russian army hits them after that. So this tells you that, both sides are super stretched, and this conflict is kind of like freezing on its own because of the lack of resources. Slowly but surely, it started happening sort of on their sort of sides, and then now it gets to the heart of it, which is this Donbass salient, right? So it's unclear where it all goes. In terms of Ukraine, there is very clear path that Ukraine is receiving more and more weapons from the West, which obviously will tilt the balance of the power more in favor of Ukrainian side. But as we all know, this Lend-Lease law is still not signed, and it's going to be signed on May 9th. But then even some of the number of these weapons is totally not sufficient. So, for example, this self-propelled Panzer Haubitzer 2000, which is, we'll call it PH 2000, just for the short. Ukraine gets only 12 of them. I mean, we realize this is a drop in the bucket, and less than a drop in the bucket, right? They're excellent, there is no question, but this is totally insufficient. Or Ukraine doesn't look like Ukraine is going to get another self-propelled howitzer AS-90 from the UK or M109 from the US. Those are a little bit older system, but are still decent, and that's what Ukraine needs, because this is essentially, at this point, war of artillery. And we hear reports from some of the Ukrainian fighters who say, I haven't used my rifle in about months. I haven't, was no active shooting, direct shooting. So, and obviously this is not the case for everywhere, but there is that as well, that this, and the most of the casualties are inflicted by artillery and mortar fire. just so everybody understands. So that's that's a driving, it's a workhorse of this war. That's what it's turning into. In terms of this U.S. howitzers, M777, they in Ukraine, based on what we know, but there are only 90 of them, and it's obviously again not sufficient. So it's enough to kind of create more headaches for Russia, but it's not enough to really turn the tide in Ukrainian favor. So hopefully this Lend-Lease law will change and there will be more weapons coming, heavy weapons. But what was sort of announced is totally insufficient. It's great to have them, but that's not going to change the situation. In terms of Russian air support, it's also changing because Ukrainian side now has many more anti-air missiles right now. The troops are saturated with them. So effectiveness of the Russian air support is also going tremendously down. Because we mentioned this before about like a week or 2 weeks ago that Russian assault helicopters, they're not approaching targets anymore. They coming like from 5 to 6 kilometers and they basically tilt their nose up and then they shoot their rockets so that they can hit, targets as far as possible, right? So they're trying to avoid to get in direct sight of Ukrainian troops, and most of those rockets are unguided, so effectiveness close to zero essentially. The pilot can also put a check mark. Oh, I did what I was asked for, but the result is nobody can verify it. So, but we can understand that the results are pretty poor, right? The same is start to happen with Russian aircraft situation, right? So the importance of the air is waning. It's not at zero, but it was significantly reduced, and it's probably still going to be important if Ukraine tries to do any kind of offensive, because then the Russia will master whatever it has to obliterate that offensive. Even if they lose a lot of aircraft, of helicopters, they still will do sort of this like for like exchange. But for day-to-day fighting, the air support importance is very low at this point. And even we hear from the Russian troops, they saying that air support is totally overrated. Unless you have a direct hit by the bomb, it's essentially effectiveness is not there. It's scary, totally scary, right? Especially for people who are new to this. But from what they're seeing, a lot of Ukrainian strongholds remain, continue fighting unless they directly hit by the bomb, which happens extremely rare. So this tells you that the whole war is revolving around artillery and mortar attacks at this point. Okay, those were important pieces that we want to discuss, and now let's walk through the front line in a clockwise fashion, as we always do, and we're going to start from the north, from Kharkiv front line, which we discussed a little bit. So, as we mentioned before, Russian troops are on retreat here, and just we want to make it clear, it's initiative of the Russian troops to withdraw. Right, so they withdrawing, and Ukrainian forces mostly following, gently pushing them, sometimes capturing some prisoners of war, sometimes damaging some equipment. But essentially, it's initiative on the Russian side. And right now, they about 6 to 8 kilometers. In some areas is actually even less, probably 2 kilometers or something from the state border. But we do think that they're going to probably withdraw in a matter of a week totally behind the Russian border, and that's how this portion is going to look like. So we also spotted that 138th Brigade is also operating here as well, not only in this area. So apparently it's split into pieces, and the same as 144th Division, by the way. But in any case, we think this active fighting here is essentially over in a week or so, and it's going to be relatively quiet. A stretch of front line similar to how it is here. So that's now. Let's continue going. We actually want to show you something. We found OpenStreet maps, and they in a way better because they clearly show railway roads and regular roads. So everything that's gray here, those are railroads. So those are railroads here, and red and orange, those are just main kind of highways or major roads and so on. So if we look at the, well, actually, we can look here at the situation with the supply of Russian troops on Izyum bridgehead, which is here. So as you can see, it goes through Vovchansk, right? Then it goes to Kupiansk, and then it kind of like probably stops here because this was used to be under Ukrainian control, and that's probably now makes more sense why Russian troops. This another reason why they decided to clear this Liman bridgehead held by Ukrainian side, because potentially then they can actually supply their troops. Because you can see that the line goes kind of like this, and then they can supply. But essentially, there is difficulty in supplying Russian troops in terms of. Right now, it looks like everything comes to Kupiansk through the railroad, and then they use just regular roads, which again, the main one kind of, if you see the orange one, kind of goes on the other side of this artificial lake, then kind of goes here, and then it goes back before it hits Izyum, right? And this Ukrainian troops used to be somewhere around this area, so it was really close to the main supply lines of the Russian troops. And we're sure that they use probably more like smaller minor roads somewhere here that we don't see. There's obviously a network of minor roads. But as you can imagine, if you're supplying a lot of troops, and it's a lot of troops here, you have huge traffic, and minor roads are not very helpful for that reason. So hopefully this helps a little bit with understanding logistics and how Russian troops are being supplied on Izyum bridgehead. So there is another question that's we actually about the Ukrainian offensive in the direction of Izyum, and with the idea of cutting off or destroying this bridgehead that the Russian troops established. And we saw that about 3 or 4 days ago in Russian sources. Obviously, Ukrainian sources they wouldn't say that, but actually we'll talk about that a little bit in a few minutes. So we saw that this is just idea of Russian propaganda because it's so insane to do this way that we just saw that this is just nobody in their right mind do something like this. And so we just saw that this is just Russian propaganda and dismissed it. And then, about a day or two ago, the Ukrainian like military top and just general political top announced, oh, we're gonna do offensive in Kharkiv region and specifically towards Izyum, which is totally insane to us to announce offensive to essentially to everybody and to your enemy, making essentially letting your enemy to prepare. And then what happened next is it appears that it's true that this is actually the plan of this offensive. And Ukrainian side is trying to establish pontoon bridges here in this area to actually do this offense. So essentially, Russian side knew this for about all of this plan for about a week. They were like observing all of these efforts, and then finally today they were striking those pontoon bridges and successfully destroyed that. And in a way, it's actually good that they destroyed this, because if Ukrainian side decided to execute on this plan, this would be total disaster for Ukrainian side. So in a way, it's even better how it all played out, because the reason why it is, and first, it's actually, as you can see, it's a pine forest region, so it will be relatively easy for the Russian side to defend. It's really hard to attack through the forest region for the most part. That's one like sort of item. The second one item is it's very short distance, no more than 10 kilometers for to pull some of the Russian troops and hit attackers back, right? So there's no there's no ability to create any kind of encirclement for Russian side, and then they probably will bring even more troops. So this would stall. This will turn into some kind of mid grinder with no chance of success for Ukrainian side. So, and especially since this was already known to the Russian side, there's no surprise. There's no surprise factor here, which is essential for any offensive. And so, in a way, it's great that it's failed because it would be disaster for Ukrainian side. So this is what's going on with this, and hopefully it makes more clear for everyone, and hopefully Ukrainian side does not continue doing this type of stuff. So let's continue. Let's look at the Izyum bridgehead itself. So that area is kind of the area where the Ukraine tries to do the pontoon bridges is there. So again, everything is stable. Just it's World War I, as we discussed before. It's even stable on the Liman bridgehead, which we're saying the Ukrainian forces there are slowly losing in general, but it's still stable for now. So there is some kind of balance of power there as well. Now let's actually look a little bit at the tip of the Donbass salient, and we don't have any new updates where exactly the front line is going on here from either side. So we're just gonna say there is something going on. There is a fighting in this village of Bilogorivka. Unclear who controls it. Could be that both sides control some portions of it. Totally unclear situation here. What is very clear is that Russian troops managed to get to the outskirts of the town from the southeast and directly east. So, and one important point that someone actually mentioned, that geography of this area is very similar to, it's the same geography essentially to what is going on here on the Izyum bridgehead, where the western bank is much higher than the eastern bank. So if you control western bank, you can easily defend your positions, basically, right? So, and this is true for the rest of this, for this whole stretch, because this is continuing on that stretch. So again, this is on the higher ground. This whole area is higher ground, and Ukrainian artillery can easily target Russian attacking troops, and then as a result you have huge losses, and that's probably part of the reason why it took so long for the Russian troops to clear Rubizhne and have so many losses in the process. So for that reason, Russian side is trying to create bridgeheads and trying to find area where they can get on the western bank without this bloody fight for Severodonetsk, right? So the idea is, okay, can we somehow establish bridgehead here and kind of start advancing, and then create a risk of encirclement for this group, and they will just withdraw on their own, and then therefore we don't need to fight. We win this way. So, which is good idea in general. This is a very intelligent idea. So for that reason, they tried in 3 places. One is called the village of Pryvillya, and then another one is Bilogorivka, and then the third one is Serebryanka. So they were not successful in either place, in none of these places, but nevertheless they're trying, right? They're probing to find and trying to find where they can get over. So it's totally possible they may try to get here near Dronivka, which used to have a railroad bridge and was blown up by retreating Ukrainian forces. So they will continue doing that, because straight attack on Severodonetsk, it will turn into much bigger, much bloodier Rubizhne, which was bloody for the Russian side. And, Ukrainian side had significant losses there as well. But that because of the attacking side, the Russian side for sure had higher losses, which is normal in this situation. Now let's continue going south, and let's look at what's going on in this stretch of the front line, which is very important, because this is essentially like a attempt to create southern pincer in this smaller pocket here, right? So that's a reason why Russian side is actively attacking this village of Orikhova with the hope to kind of like break here, or the another area where they put a lot of effort is Popasna, which is directly south here, which is essentially creates the same opportunity, right? Then you can advance from the south and create the risk of encirclement and force withdrawal of Ukrainian troops to the west. So, and this is more close-up look at Severodonetsk. This is what's going on in Popasna. The same situation, even though Russian news sources claim today that that Ukrainian side fully abandoned Popasna, which, just as a reminder, Ukraine controlled between 40 to 50% of Popasna. We are skeptical about that. We don't think that that's happening. There's no reason why Ukrainian side would abandon good defensive positions in Popasna. So we just think that this is some kind of propaganda, but anything is possible in this world, and we were surprised before. Now let's keep going to the south, to the area directly west of Donetsk. We mentioned yesterday that there is some small progress by Russian side here towards village of Novobakhmutivka. They captured village right here called Troitsky, and they continuing attack towards Novobakhmutivka, but we have not heard any news or any new progress there, so we assume that the front line there is stable. Again, the typical areas of fighting here is Avdiivka, and then Marinka, and then Novomikhailivka. Those are, places where Russian side is continuously attacking. Now let's continue towards south, and we start going west, and we're going to look at Zaporizhya front line. Here, there's nothing new from what we seeing. The same stable position at this point of the front line. The only difference is that Russian side apparently captured village of Stepove, and probably several days ago. We apparently missed that, and they attacked today towards village of Poltavka, but they were not successful. The attack was repelled. But this poses a question to us: what's going on here on the Ukrainian side? Because does look a little bit like there is some kind of emptiness here, and potentially Russian side can try. Obviously, they will try to exploit it, but since we know that there is 128th Brigade here and Azov Kiev Regiment, we're pretty sure that they will manage this whole front line. When we were discussing the Ukrainian militia at the beginning and talking about the soldier, the Ukrainian militia members who were thrown into battle with very little training, that's where we were referring to this 110th and 109th Brigade of Ukrainian militia, where they were literally giving the anti-tank weapons like NLAWs and javelins without literally any training or even explanation how to use them. Like, here it is, it's up to you. So that led to significant. That's how this wedge was created, actually, because the front line was more like straight line here, more or less. Actually, not even straight line. Ukraine controlled. It was kind of wedged into the Russian direction, actually. So, and that's the reason how Russian side managed to create this wedge, and that's in the process. Both brigades suffered significant losses. Now let's have a look at the entire stretch. So this is where we were, this wedge that we were talking about, and the rest of it is essentially stable, right? So there are three key strongholds: Kamiensky, Orikhiv, and Gulyai-Pole. And also we can add this Velika Novosilka, but it's kind of like separated in a way at this point. So otherwise, it's pretty much stable here. There's nothing to report. So let's actually look at the very western part of the front line, at the Kherson bridgehead. Again, here it's the same situation. No active fighting in terms of no infantry or tank attacks. It's all about artillery shelling and so on, just shooting from the distance. So the front line here is totally stable, and again, World War One type of situation. Ken, thanks everyone for watching, and until tomorrow, bye bye.